I'm Caroline Monroe, 33 years old, and for 5 long years I built a tech company behind closed doors while my family thought I was drifting without direction. Last night at my brother's engagement party, his fiancée leaned in and whispered, "Wait, you're the founder of CareSync." The silence that followed was louder than any applause. My mother's fork stopped midair. My father's glass hovered, and my brother, he looked like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. All those years they called me lost, and now they finally saw me. Before I go any further, drop a comment and let me know where you're listening from, and hit that like and subscribe button if you've ever been underestimated by the people who should have known you best. I grew up in Foxhall Ridge just outside of D.C., the kind of neighborhood where yards were trimmed like golf greens and every mailbox had a law firm or hospital name tied to it. My father, Dr. Charles Monroe, wasn't just a cardiothoracic surgeon, he trained other surgeons. My mother, Ellen, practiced corporate law with a calm fierceness that made grown men think twice before interrupting her. And then there was my older brother, James, 4 years ahead of me, and the kind of kid who never colored outside the lines. Honor roll varsity swim, Johns Hopkins med school, the whole package. Our house looked like a magazine photo spread, but it never really felt warm. At dinner, the food was perfect, but the conversation was performance. Each night, like clockwork, Mom would ask, "So what did everyone accomplish today?" James always had a list, research assistant, this pre-med conference that, and me, I once told them I'd taught myself to code a little website over the weekend. I was 16 and proud of it. Mom smiled that tight smile of hers and said, "That's nice, sweetheart, but college admissions look for consistent focus, not distractions." Dad nodded, already turning to ask James about his lab project. I got the message. Tech was a toy. Real work wore a white coat or carried a briefcase. I started spending more time in my room, fingers flying across the keyboard late into the night. Python JavaScript design mock-ups. I built digital worlds in silence while my family praised James's research posters in the foyer. When I created a program to help streamline my high school's annual fundraiser, the PTA advisor was thrilled. "You should be proud," she told my parents at the spring banquet. Mom simply said Caroline has lots of interests, but we're focusing on pre-law. Senior year, while everyone expected me to apply to Brown or Columbia, I sent my application to Georgia Tech. No pre-law, just straight computer science. When the acceptance came with a full scholarship, Dad looked at the letter like it had a typo. "You could have done better," he said. "You're wasting your test scores." That fall, I left for Atlanta with a suitcase, a scholarship, and the quiet determination to build a life they wouldn't understand, but couldn't ignore forever. And I didn't know it then, but the very thing they dismissed would one day turn their world upside down. The first semester at Georgia Tech moved fast. Classes were harder, the campus bigger, but for the first time, I didn't feel like I had to explain myself. Nobody here cared that I hadn't followed the pre-law track. I was just Caroline, the girl who could debug your code in half the time and still make it to class on 4 hours of sleep. I met Emily Chen in our advanced software systems class. She was sharp, no nonsense, and just as obsessed with clean code as I was. We started staying after class to compare notes, then coffee turned into weekend project sessions. We clicked without having to try. One evening, sitting on the worn leather couch in the student lounge, she pulled up an article about medical record failures and shook her head. "My aunt got misdiagnosed 3 times before they finally caught her lupus," she said, her voice flat but her eyes burning. The doctors weren't talking to each other. They all had pieces of the puzzle, but no one was putting it together. We started sketching out ideas on napkins. Simple things at first: dashboards, alerts, secure messaging. But the more we talked, the more it felt like something real. By the time junior year rolled around, We'd built a prototype for a healthcare platform, something that could actually help patients and doctors communicate better. We called it CareSync. That summer, we moved into her parents' garage in Sandy Springs and worked every spare hour we had. Her mom brought sandwiches and asked about the app like it was already in the App Store. Her dad helped us jury-rig a second monitor from an old TV. It was messy and loud and perfect. It didn't look anything like the silence I'd grown up with at home. Back in D.C. for Thanksgiving, the contrast was sharp. The minute I stepped through the door, it was like I'd stepped backward in time. Dad asked about my tech stuff while flipping through the Wall Street Journal. Mom asked if I'd started reconsidering a legal track. She didn't wait for the answer. James had just been accepted into a competitive residency program, and the house was buzzing with plans for his engagement party in the spring. At dinner, all eyes were on him. Mine only landed in passing a polite "How's school?" before they moved on to dessert. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat in the kitchen and reread an email from a hospital administrator in Atlanta who'd just signed on to beta test our software. I didn't mention it. I didn't think anyone would ask. By senior year, we had enough grant funding from university competitions to file for our first patent. We scraped together the paperwork to register as an LLC. One of our professors put us in touch with Dr. Lorraine King, an administrator at a regional hospital chain who helped us pilot the platform. She'd spent 20 years watching nurses juggle outdated systems, and when she saw our prototype, she nodded slowly and said, "You're going to change the way hospitals run, you know that." We didn't, not really, but we wanted to try. Meanwhile, my parents still thought I was working on a student project. When I came home for Christmas, they introduced me to someone from their country club whose son was very successful in IT and asked if I'd be interested in an internship. I thanked them. I didn't correct them. Emily and I graduated and moved into a small apartment on the south side of Atlanta. We lived on cereal, ramen, and iced coffee. During the day, we coded from a corner desk at a co-working space we could barely afford. At night, we picked up small web design jobs to pay rent. Slowly, we built a team. Our first hire was a developer named Marcus, who worked out of his living room in Macon. Our second was a former nurse who helped us translate technical needs into workflows doctors could actually use. We didn't post about it. We didn't brag. We just kept going. By the time I turned 27, we had over a dozen contracts across the Southeast. One angel investor helped us move into a proper office space. Another helped us expand our back-end systems. We weren't profitable yet, but we were stable, real. At home, nothing changed. I still drove the same car I'd had in college. I wore plain cardigans to holiday dinners. When my mother asked how work was going, I just said fine. She never asked for details. James announced his engagement at Easter. His fiancée Claire was a senior rep at a pharmaceutical firm. My parents lit up when she talked about corporate events and research grants. I poured another glass of water and smiled when it was my turn to congratulate them. A few weeks later, Emily and I sat across from two men in tailored suits who offered to buy CareSync for $30 million. We listened. We nodded. Then we walked out of that high-rise conference room and laughed all the way to the parking lot. "It's not time," she said. No, I agreed. Not yet. Instead, we took a minority investment from a VC firm based in Austin. Their offer valued CareSync at over $100 million. It gave us room to hire Grow Expand without losing control. When the press release went out, I asked them to only use my first name. No photo, no spotlight, just Caroline, co-founder and CEO. I wasn't ready. Not to be seen, not by them. Emily asked once after a conference where I'd avoided every camera, "Don't you want people to know?" Eventually, I said, I wasn't hiding. But I wasn't offering anything up either. Not until I knew they couldn't take it apart or dismiss it. And then one phone call changed everything. It was a Sunday afternoon. I was reviewing reports when my mother's name lit up on my phone. "Caroline, exciting news," she said. "James and Claire, set the date. Labor Day weekend. They're planning a private dinner at Hawthorne Club next month. Very elegant. You'll need to clear your schedule. Hawthorne Club, private chef, hand-cut crystal, that kind of place." "I'll be there," I told her. "Good," she said. Then after a pause, "And Caroline, do try to wear something polished. Last time you looked a bit collegiate." "I'll handle it, Mom. Well, if you're sure. Claire works for one of those big medical tech firms. Everyone will be dressed to impress." Something tightened in my chest. "Which company?" "Oh, something about health software. Everbright Horizon." "I forget." I didn't. I hung up and called Emily. "You're not going to believe this," I said. "James is marrying someone from Horizon Health Technologies." She didn't answer right away. "That's the company negotiating to acquire us," I added. There was a pause. "Do they know who you are?" "Not yet." We both knew that wouldn't last long, and with the engagement dinner just weeks away, I had a decision to make, one that would change everything. The week leading up to the dinner was quiet, but not in a peaceful way. My phone rang twice, once from my father, once from my mother, both about dress code, both under the same polite tone that always seemed to carry more meaning than the words alone. "Caroline," my dad said in his voicemail. "Claire's parents are very accomplished. Might be good to have something ready to share about your work, something impressive." The message ended without a goodbye. The next day, Mom called again. She started off with a reminder about parking at the Hawthorne Club, then moved into a softer voice. "I hope you'll wear something professional," she said. "That sweater you wore at Christmas? Well, it was very cozy." I didn't answer right away. "Claire's father might be able to help with something at Apple," she added. "He mentioned they're always hiring for support roles. Just a place to start, of course." I thanked her. Then I hung up. I sat with that for a while in the quiet of my apartment, surrounded by reminders of the life they didn't know I had. The stack of pitch decks on my desk, the framed print of our first user milestone, the whiteboard with product sprints mapped out through Q3. They didn't know any of it. I called Rachel later that night. She'd known me since middle school, long before CareSync was even an idea. Over the years, she'd watched me build the company from the ground up, even helped test some of our earliest mock-ups. "They set you up for a pity job interview," she said, not even trying to hide her disbelief. "While you're negotiating a $200 million acquisition." I didn't say anything. "Let me guess, they still think you're between gigs." I nodded. "You know what you should do," she said. "Show up in a hoodie, watch their jaws hit the floor." I laughed just a little. "No performances," I told her. "No revenge reveal. I'll just go as myself." The night before the dinner, the final offer from Horizon came through. $215 million, with retention bonuses and a 3-year leadership role for both Emily and me. The deal would be announced publicly after Labor Day. Until then, we were still officially under NDA. I didn't sleep much. The next evening, I arrived at the Hawthorne Club right on time. The valet opened the door, and the sound of a string quartet drifted out from the main dining room. Inside, everything was polished glass, silver wood floors that didn't creak, the kind of place where no one had to raise their voice to be heard. The hostess led me to the private room at the back. My parents were already there. My father stood near the bar, deep in conversation with a man in a navy blazer. My mother was adjusting name cards at the long table, her expression focused, her hands moving just so. James spotted me first. "Caroline," he said, coming over. "You made it." He hugged me like he always had, confidently, like the world made perfect sense. "Come meet Claire." She was standing near the window looking out over the golf course. Tall, poised with her dark hair swept into a smooth twist. She turned when she heard us and offered her hand. "I've heard so much about you," she said. "Congratulations," I told her. "I'm happy for you both." My mother joined us then, taking a quick look at my outfit, a tailored navy dress, simple heels, before giving a small nod. "We've put you next to Aunt Maggie," she said. "You two always got along." Translation seated at the edge of the table, away from the important guests. Dinner began with champagne and carefully worded toasts. My father stood first, lifting his glass. "To James," he said, "and to the extraordinary woman he's chosen. We couldn't be prouder." The room murmured its approval. My mother followed, sharing a polished recap of James's accomplishments, from science fair trophies to surgical residencies, ending with a gracious nod to Claire's impressive resume. The first course arrived soon after. Conversation flowed easily for most of the table, though my end was quieter. Aunt Maggie asked if I was still doing something with computers. I nodded. She asked if there was room to grow in that field. I said yes. My uncle leaned over during the second course. "James said you might have a lead at Apple," he said. "That would be a real step up." I took a sip of water. "I'm happy where I am," I said simply. Across the table, I noticed Claire watching me. Her expression had changed, not confused exactly, but focused, like she was trying to place something. She leaned forward slightly. "Caroline," she said in a quieter voice. "Forgive me. Is your last name Monroe?" The room quieted just a bit. "Yes," I said. Her eyes widened. "You're Caroline Monroe, from CareSync." James let out a short laugh. No, my sister's not with that company. She's in tech support, or something." Claire didn't blink. "Actually, your sister is the founder and CEO," she said, turning to look at him. "She built the company my firm is acquiring." The words seemed to land one by one. Forks paused. Glasses stopped mid-air. My father stared at me. "Is that true?" he asked. I looked at him evenly. "Yes. Emily Chen and I founded CareSync 6 years ago. We're currently in over 300 hospitals." Claire nodded. "Her platform reduced communication errors at Mercy General by 60% in under a year. We've been following their work for months. It's exceptional." James's mouth opened slightly, then closed again. No one said anything for a while. Eventually, someone at the far end of the table started a new conversation, but it barely held. Questions trickled in, hesitant at first, then more confident. My mother asked if I'd always planned to start a business. My uncle asked what it was like to run a company that size. Even Aunt Maggie asked if we were hiring. The rest of the evening passed in a blur of introductions and suddenly eager interest. When we stood to leave, Claire stepped beside me. "I didn't mean to cause a scene," she said. I was surprised, in a good way. "It's all right," I told her. "For what it's worth," she added, "your name's come up a lot internally. People call you the quiet genius." I thanked her. Then I walked to the valet stand, the night air cooler than I'd expected. The secret was out now. Whatever came next, it wouldn't be quiet. The text started before I even got home that night. First came my mother. "We need to talk. Brunch tomorrow, the Drake Hotel, 11 sharp." By morning, there were messages from cousins I hadn't spoken to in years. A few congratulated me. Most asked if I had any tips on investing. James sent 3 texts in a row. The last one just said, "Why didn't you tell me I didn't answer him?" But I agreed to brunch. When I arrived at the Drake the next morning, my parents were already seated. My father stood when I approached the table, hesitating before offering a quick hug. My mother reached for my hand and gave it a firm squeeze. Her smile stretched too tight. "You look well," my father said. "Darling," my mother added, "we have so much to catch up on." I spent the morning reading about CareSync, the awards, the growth metrics. Why would you keep something like this from us? I set my napkin across my lap and waited until the server poured the coffee. "You didn't want to hear about it," I said. My father straightened. "That's not fair. We've always supported your interests. I looked across the table at both of them. You called it a phase. You asked me to apply for a desk job at James's hospital. You set up interviews I never asked for. At some point, it stopped being easier to explain and became easier not to try. My mother's expression shifted just slightly. We were concerned, she said. You kept everything so vague. How were we supposed to know you could have asked, I said. Really asked. The conversation carried on through the eggs Benedict and the second pot of coffee. There were pauses, some long. My mother apologized in her way. My father mostly listened occasionally, chiming in with a reminder that they'd always believed I was intelligent, even if they didn't always understand my choices. Near the end of the meal, my mother glanced toward the windows. We're proud of you, Caroline, she said. I nodded. We can talk more next week, she added softer now. Back in my apartment that evening, James showed up unannounced. He held up a bottle of wine as I opened the door. I figured we might need this, he said. I stepped aside to let him in. He took in the place slowly, the view, the clean lines, the whiteboard filled with timelines and post-it notes. This is nice, he said. We settled in the living room, 2 glasses, a view of the city. He spoke first. I've been kind of a jerk. I didn't say anything. I think I liked being the one who had it all figured out. The job, the track, the clear steps. I didn't really think about what you were building, or what it took. He looked down at his glass. I'm sorry. We talked for a long time after that. Maybe longer than we ever had. He asked questions about CareSync, real ones, about funding, hiring, product updates. I asked about his rotation, his work with stroke patients, the shifts that ran long into the night. He told me Claire wanted us to be friends, that she respected what I'd built, that maybe now that we were going to be working together it would help. I'd like that, I said. In the weeks that followed, everything moved quickly. Horizon's acquisition finalized on schedule. Our legal teams crossed the final T's, and the paperwork was signed on a Friday morning just before the markets closed. I was officially Horizon's new Director of Innovation. Emily would head international growth. The press release included both our names first and last, a photo of Emily, and for the first time a headshot of me. No profile, no silhouette, just me. That weekend my mother called. I saw the photo, she said. You look so confident. It was quiet for a second. I showed it to your aunt, she added. She couldn't believe it. Some days were still awkward. My father tried giving me business advice over lunch. My mother asked if I was remembering to eat enough with such a demanding travel schedule, but every once in a while something would shift, small but real. They asked to tour the office. They listened while I walked them through the platform. My mother stood in the middle of our operations floor and said, "It feels like a real company." I nodded. It is. Claire helped more than anyone. She spoke their language, corporate metrics, industry rankings, professional optics. She explained things I didn't want to. She translated when I ran out of patience. They're trying, she said over coffee one afternoon. They just don't know how yet. They've had time, I replied. She stirred her tea. So did I with my own parents, she said. Sometimes people need longer than we think. I didn't answer, but I didn't push back either. 6 months after the engagement dinner, I looked out from my new office overlooking the Chicago River. The platform had expanded to Europe. Emily was preparing a pilot program in Brazil. My inbox was full of invites, panels, mentorships, startup circles. I answered some, ignored others. That Friday evening, Claire sent a reminder dinner at my place. Jason says he's baking. Backup cupcakes are already in the car. I smiled and closed my laptop. The rest of the story wasn't written yet, but I knew the rhythm, now steady, sometimes slow, sometimes awkward, but moving forward. Dinner that night felt easy in a way that still surprised me. Jason showed up first, carrying both a homemade chocolate cake and a bakery box tucked under one arm. I wasn't sure how it would turn out, he said, setting them both on the counter. Just figured I'd hedge my bets. I lifted the lid on the back up a dozen lemon cupcakes with sugared violets. "You didn't need a backup," I said. He laughed. I set off the smoke alarm halfway through, but I didn't burn the whole thing. Claire arrived a few minutes later, wine in one hand, a stack of folded place cards in the other. "Don't ask," she said, waving the cards. "Wedding seating logistics." I needed a break. We ate around my kitchen island. No formal place settings, just mismatched plates and cloth napkins folded once. Jason talked about the newest rotation at the hospital, his first trauma shift. Claire chimed in with updates from the planning committee and a venue tour her mother had insisted on. After we cleared the dishes, Jason poured coffee while I brought out the cake. We settled into the living room, and Claire tucked her feet under her on the couch. "My parents keep calling you the tech one," she said with a half smile. "I think my mom's been Googling software terms just to hold a conversation." Jason leaned forward. "Mom, too. She's reading some book about under-30 entrepreneurs. I found it on her nightstand." I glanced at both of them. "She still thinks I'm 28, I said. "She's trying," Claire replied. We sat for a moment, each of us with a warm mug and a slice of cake, the kind of quiet that didn't feel like silence. "I've been thinking," Claire said, setting her cup down. "Do you ever wish it had gone differently, that your family had understood what you were building?" Earlier, I didn't answer right away. Jason looked over at me, waiting too. "Sometimes," I said, "but I don't know if I would have built it the same way." Jason nodded slowly. "If they'd been bragging about you at every holiday dinner, I probably would have been unbearable." Claire raised her eyebrows. "More unbearable," he clarified. I smiled. In the weeks that followed, I found myself settling into a new rhythm. My role at Horizon was demanding but focused. I led a small innovation team based in Chicago, while Emily managed international development from our office in London. We spoke every other day, usually early morning or late evening. The time difference worked out fine. At Horizon, most people already knew who I was, at least professionally, but I kept a low profile. I preferred team meetings over town halls, hands-on work over panel appearances. Our team expanded quickly, and by spring, CareSync's platform had been adopted by over 600 hospitals worldwide. There were moments of tension still, phone calls from my father where he offered suggestions about scaling efficiently, even if he didn't quite understand the product. Texts from my mother about a cousin who was thinking of getting into computers and might benefit from shadowing me. But there were real efforts, too. My father asked to join a virtual product demo. He stayed quiet through most of it, then asked 3 thoughtful questions afterward. My mother sent me an article about patient safety software and said, "This made me think of what you're doing. It wasn't perfect, but it was different." Claire helped more than she probably realized. When things got tense, she smoothed the edges. She explained market strategy in ways my parents could follow. She framed my success in terms that felt familiar to them: growth charts, hospital rankings, leadership structures. She never forced anything, just offered language they could understand. They spent 30 years thinking success had to look a certain way, she told me once. Now they're learning a new shape. That spring, I began mentoring at a local high school. One Saturday a month, I met with a group of girls who were interested in STEM. We covered basics, front-end coding logic puzzles, simple data management, but mostly we talked. One afternoon, a girl named Kyra stayed behind after the workshop. She was 15, sharp eyes, quick to smile. "My mom wants me to be a lawyer," she said, "but I like building things." I nodded. "She says computers are just a hobby," Kira added, "that I'm wasting my test scores." I didn't answer right away. I just pulled out a notepad and wrote down a few websites, scholarships, and coding camps. "Here," I said, "start with these. And if you ever need someone to talk to, my email's on the bottom." She looked up. "Thanks." As she walked out the door, I felt a familiar tightness in my chest, the kind that used to sit with me during family dinners back when no one asked what I was working on. That evening, I sent Claire a message. "Still thinking about that question. Maybe it was supposed to go this way." She replied 10 minutes later. "Maybe. Or maybe you just made it work." I didn't respond, but I saved the message anyway. By the time June rolled around, we'd finalized a new contract with a major hospital network in California. Emily was flying back for the announcement. Jason and Claire had locked in their wedding date for late September. One night, after a long call with a partner hospital in Toronto, I stood at my window overlooking the city. The lights below shimmered like static. I thought about the girl in my high school bedroom teaching herself how to write her first line of code, trying not to be noticed. And now all this. It didn't feel like triumph. It just felt steady. It felt like mine. By midsummer, things had settled into something that felt close to balance. Work days were full but manageable. Horizon's rollout of the CareSync platform was ahead of schedule, and our Midwest division had just crossed its 6-month milestone without a single implementation delay. Emily checked in twice a week from London, usually in the early morning before my first meeting. The team was growing fast, but we were still close-knit. Most of us had been there from the beginning. At home, I kept things simple. I'd moved into a slightly larger apartment with more natural light and a long balcony overlooking the river. My schedule finally allowed for dinners that didn't come out of a box and weekend mornings where I didn't check email before getting out of bed. My parents called on Sundays now. At first, the conversations were brief weather news updates on family. Over time, the tone shifted. My father started asking thoughtful questions about the business. My mother asked if I'd read an article before she forwarded it. Once she even said, "It reminded me of your work." The change wasn't sudden, but it was steady. In early July, Claire invited me to a bridal brunch at her parents' home. It was a quiet gathering, just close friends and family, and I wasn't sure if I'd fit into the mix. But I showed up on time with a small gift wrapped in linen paper, a bottle of sparkling cider, and an open mind. Her mother greeted me warmly at the door. Inside the dining room table was set with mismatched vintage china and small floral arrangements in mason jars. Claire pulled me aside while guests mingled. "Thank you for coming," she said. "My mom's been following your company ever since the acquisition. She started a LinkedIn account just to keep up." I smiled. "I'm flattered." "She's fascinated by what you've built," Claire added. "It's changed the way she thinks about technology." After the meal, we sat in the sunroom while gifts were opened. When it came to mine, a set of hand-stitched recipe cards and a walnut box I'd found at a weekend market, Claire turned to me and said, "You really thought about this. I wanted to bring something that wasn't on a list." She reached for my hand briefly and gave it a squeeze. Later that week, she and Jason came by my apartment with takeout and wedding updates. We ate on the balcony as the sun set, bowls balanced in our laps, the air warm and still. "We finalized the guest list," Jason said. "It's mostly family and close friends, but we've added a few of your colleagues from Horizon." Claire wanted to make sure they had good seats, he added. "No corner table this time." I looked at both of them, unsure what to say. Claire smiled. "You deserve to be seen," she said. "We won't let that happen again." I nodded. Then I reached for my drink and changed the subject. The following Monday, I had a quarterly meeting with the Horizon Executive Board. We met in a quiet conference room on the 15th floor. 12 people, most of whom I'd only met once or twice. I gave my presentation, progress metrics, expansion goals, product refinements, then took a few questions about upcoming partnerships. Afterward, as we were gathering our materials, one of the senior board members approached me. "I read your founding story in the Techage feature last month," she said. "You don't speak about it much, but it's remarkable." "I try to focus on the work," I replied. She nodded. "That's clear, but your story matters too." That evening, I walked along the lakefront path just before dark. I didn't check email, I didn't call anyone. I just watched the way the lights bounced on the water and let the air move around me. The next day, I received a message from a high school administrator who ran one of the STEM mentoring programs I'd spoken at earlier in the year. "We're launching a student accelerator," she wrote. "Would you consider sponsoring one of the pilot teams?" I replied yes, before thinking it over. 2 weeks later, I sat in the back of a classroom as 6 girls, all under 17, pitched a basic health tracking app for teens managing chronic illness. It wasn't perfect, but it was focused, thoughtful, clear. Afterward, the lead student, a girl named Tia, asked to walk me out. "I looked up your company," she said. "My brother's hospital uses it now." I nodded. He said it helped cut wait times because nurses get alerts faster. "I'm glad it's working," I said. "I want to build something that helps people too," she added, "even if no one believes I can." I paused before responding. "You just did," I said, "and you'll do more." That weekend, my parents came over for dinner, just the 2 of them. It wasn't a holiday. There wasn't an occasion. They brought a bottle of wine and a small potted plant. "This looked like something you could keep alive," my mother joked. We ate in the dining area by the windows, passing serving bowls and catching up about ordinary things. My father complimented the layout of the space. My mother asked about the cooktop. After the meal, my father stood and walked to the window. "You've built something lasting," he said quietly. I didn't answer. I didn't need to. We stood there for a while, watching the city settle into night. There wasn't a speech. There wasn't a moment. But something had shifted. The wedding was held in late September, just as the leaves started to turn. Claire and Jason had chosen a small estate in the Virginia countryside, surrounded by fields and trees that caught the light in a way that made everything feel calm. The ceremony took place under a white canopy, just past a row of stone steps. There were maybe 100 guests, friends, family, colleagues, but the mood was easy, almost familiar. I arrived a few minutes early wearing a deep green dress and simple heels. Claire's mother waved me over to the seating area near the front. I wasn't tucked away at the end of the row this time. Jason spotted me from a distance. He nodded once, then smiled. No words, just that small gesture between siblings who've made it through something. After the vows, we moved to the reception hall where tables were arranged around an open floor. I found my place card beside a physician from Jason's hospital and one of Horizon's senior engineers. Claire had done the seating herself. During dinner, my father stood to give his toast. He didn't use notes, just placed both hands on the table and spoke slowly. "Watching your children find their way in the world is not always a clear path," he said. "But sometimes, if you look closely enough, you realize they've been steady all along." There was a brief pause before he added, "To Jason and Claire and to every kind of success worth honoring." My mother didn't speak at length that night, but later as we passed in the hallway between courses, she touched my elbow gently. "Your father's speech," she said, "he meant that for both of you." I nodded once. I know. In the weeks that followed, I returned to work with a different kind of rhythm. Not quieter exactly, just more settled. The core team at Horizon expanded again, and I spent most mornings reviewing implementation schedules, meeting with clinical leads, and revising product timelines. We had just signed with a major hospital group in Canada. Emily sent me a message from the airport in Vancouver. "Tell Claire her seating chart saved me at my cousin's wedding. I owe her." I forwarded it on. October came and went. The days got shorter, but not heavier. The Sunday calls with my parents remained a regular thing, sometimes 10 minutes, sometimes more. My father mentioned a medical journal that had featured CareSync in a case study. My mother asked if I'd consider speaking at an alumni event in the spring. It wasn't always smooth. There were still small things, remarks that didn't quite land, questions that leaned too far. But I noticed the difference. They were asking because they wanted to understand, not because they needed to be reassured. That fall, I was invited to speak at a regional summit for women in tech. I almost turned it down. I didn't like microphones or large rooms, but something about the timing felt right. The auditorium held about 200 people. I stood at the podium with a presentation behind me, but I didn't use the slides much. I talked about communication gaps in healthcare, about building tools that don't just collect data but connect people, about what it means to create something when no one expects it of you. Afterward, a woman in her 60s approached me. Her name was Judith. She taught computer science at a community college outside of St. Louis. "My daughter's in pre-med," she said, "but she's always tinkering with these little data apps. She doesn't think it counts as real work." "It does," I told her. "She just hasn't found the right way to say it yet." Judith nodded, her hand resting lightly on her purse strap. "You should tell more of this story," she said. "It matters." That evening I met Jason and Claire for dinner at a small cafe on the north side. We shared a booth near the back wall. Jason ordered the flatbread he always did. Claire asked if I'd seen the new platform update Emily had rolled out. We talked about work and family, about winter plans and upcoming projects. Then between bites, Jason said, "I meant to tell you Mom showed Aunt Linda your summit video." She cried. I looked up. Mom or Aunt Linda, both. Claire reached across the table, not dramatic, just a hand over mine. I think they finally see the whole picture. I didn't say anything, but I didn't move my hand either. The next weekend, I held another mentorship session for the high school program. A new group this time, 10 students, mostly juniors. One of them, a girl named Mariah, had come in quiet. Hardly spoke during introductions. But halfway through the session, she raised her hand and said, "How do you keep going when nobody around you understands what you're doing?" No one answered right away. Then I told her this. You find one person who listens. You start there. And if you can't find that person right away, you keep building anyway. Because eventually they'll catch up. Or you'll find people who don't need catching up. She nodded once, and that was enough. At the end of the session, she handed me a folded note with her email on it. On the other side, she'd written in neat handwriting, "Thank you for showing me what possible looks like." I put the note in my coat pocket. I still have it. That night, as I walked home through the early dark, the streets were quiet, and the cold had just started to settle into the sidewalks. I passed the bakery where Jason had picked up the emergency cupcakes all those months ago and thought about how much had changed. I didn't feel like I'd arrived somewhere. It felt more like I'd opened a door. The first snow came early that year. Just a light dusting, but enough to soften the edges of the rooftops and mute the morning traffic. From my office window, the city looked hushed, like it had paused to catch its breath. Emily was flying in that afternoon for our annual review. She'd booked the same corner suite we used to meet in during the startup years, out of habit more than necessity. I was setting out mugs and a tray of pastries when I heard a knock on the door. Jason stood there with 2 coffees and a folded newspaper tucked under his arm. "Claire said you had a full day. Figured you could use a break," he said, stepping inside. He set the coffee down and handed me the paper. My name was printed just below the fold, an industry piece on CareSync's impact on rural clinics. The article mentioned patient outcomes reduced, wait times, improved coordination between providers. But what caught me was the final line, built from the ground up by someone who believed in solving real problems, even when no one else was looking. Jason read it too. "They got it right," he said. We sat by the window for a while, not talking much, just watching the city fade into white. Later that evening, my parents came by for dinner. They brought a pot of soup and a loaf of bread, still warm from the bakery. My mother pulled off her gloves and glanced around. "You've made this place feel like home," she said quietly. We ate in the dining area, passing the ladle back and forth. There was no speech, no ceremony, just the quiet comfort of people learning how to show up in new ways. After the dishes were cleared, my father stood by the window again looking out. "Do you remember when you built that first website?" he asked. "We didn't understand it back then. I think we just didn't know how to ask." I nodded, not needing anything more. That night after they left, I curled up on the couch with a blanket and looked out at the snow-covered street. The light from the window stretched out across the floor. Everything was still. I thought about the girl I used to be, the one who stayed up late in a bedroom full of code printouts and computer manuals, trying to prove, if only to herself, that what she loved had value. And I thought about the people I'd built a life around Emily Jason. Claire, the students I mentored, even my parents, how they'd all become part of a story that wasn't about proving anything anymore, just living fully honestly and without apology. In the end, the real win wasn't the company or the acquisition. It wasn't the recognition. It was the quiet, steady freedom of becoming who I was meant to be, even when no one else saw it coming. And that, I think, is the kind of success worth holding on to. Before you go, I'd love to know, have you ever walked a path no one else believed in until much later? Feel free to share your story in the comments below, and if you know someone who needs to hear this, pass it along. Thank you for spending this time with me, and remember, your story matters even before the world recognizes it.